Boris Johnson is expected to kickstart Britain's summer holidays today as he unveils a list of countries that holidaymakers can visit without having to quarantine on their return.
Well, despite travel firms reporting a spike in sales, the Home Secretary is warning that negotiations on air bridges will take time.
So should the two-week quarantine period that's currently in place for everyone arriving in the UK be relaxed or, in many countries' cases, abandoned? Joining us to discuss this is Conservative MP Henry Smith, aviation analyst Alex Macheras, Professor Devi Sridhar and Portuguese politician Ricardo Baptista Leite. Well, welcome to all of you. Let's start with you, Alex, if we can. What is the situation now around the world, and in particular with Europe, in relation to quarantine? If I went to France, Spain, Italy tomorrow, what would happen to me?
Well, if you go tomorrow, by then we would have heard the announcement, which is that, currently you can fly even today to European countries. And if you are flying from the UK, then there is no mandatory quarantine for the majority of those European countries. In some countries, there is an advisory quarantine. But the UK want to try and smoothen this out with this map that they're going to reveal, where they're going to grade countries green, amber, red, depending on the risk. And ultimately, if it's green or amber, the Brits will be able to go and come back without quarantine. But I feel that there really isn't enough change in terms of we are still very much in a pandemic. There are still no health protection measures for aviation. The UK is still shying away from announcing a testing plan for passengers like the rest of the world. And the conversations I've had with airline CEOs say that this do-nothing approach is not sustainable. Maybe for July and August, but not much longer than that.
Professor Devi Sridhar, it seems the air bridge... Look, I'm really happy that we're going to be allowed to go on holiday, and I think a lot of people are. But perhaps we're not putting our health in front of our desperate need to get away. And there seems to be a sort of inconsistency in the countries that we're planning to go to, because if you look at... There's a list here of active cases. On the one hand, you have, we might be able to go to Greece, for example, which has just under 2,000 active cases. But we can also potentially go to France, which has around 94,000 active cases. Meanwhile, I know we have our Portuguese politician as part of our lineup this morning. And in Portugal, there's 13,000 cases, but apparently Portugal's not going to be on the list. So can you see, Professor Sridhar, a problem here with the countries that we might go to and the risks we might be putting ourselves at if we travel there, and also the risks that they might be taking on by receiving us?
Yes, definitely. It's clear that this decision is being driven by economic reasons and not public health ones. And what I would really like to see is, Britain being seen as a green country as other countries create their traffic light systems to decide who they want to partner with. We need to remember there are still serious domestic issues occurring. We still are looking at a local lockdown in parts of the country, overall infections flatlining for most of June. And how do we get kids back in school? How do we get a functioning test and trace system? How do we deal with the problems at home? So while I think it's great to be starting to look at air bridging and opportunities, I would like that to be with other countries which are performing really well, rather than right now, which seems kind of a haphazard approach.
One of the things, of course, which is being factored in here is the relative economies of all these countries. There will be a lot of French people who want to come to the UK, a lot of UK people want to go to France, same with Italy, Spain, and so on. There is an economic imperative running alongside the public health imperative, isn't there, Dr. Sridhar? Where is that line for you? You've done very well, I know, in Scotland, but where is this line?
Well, I think in Scotland right now, it's a slightly different position to England because we have such few cases. We just have a handful of cases. And so if we were going to form air bridges, and I completely agree that we need to start forming international strategies, it would be with high-performing countries like New Zealand and Greece and Denmark and Norway, where I think instead, if we're trying to partner with other countries that are having infections that are rising, like, France or Spain or other parts of the world, then of course it creates the risk of importing infections and how you actually deal with that. Because just as we are allowed to go abroad, others are allowed to come here as well without a quarantine period. And that quarantine is once you've dealt with community transmission, the main way you have of dealing with imported cases.
Why is Portugal likely not to be on the green light list?
Well, I think it's about looking at the number of daily new cases or incidents in different countries and trying to assess whether that's at a level which is seen as the risk is acceptable or not. And to be fair, a lot of countries are, approaching it in this way. Germany, Faroe Islands, Iceland, possibly, the Pacific countries as well, as they start to open their borders. And so I think, of course, this can change by the day, can change by the week. We see what's happening across the pond in the United States. And so it's a fast-moving situation.
Well, Ricardo Baptista Leite is in Portugal, near Lisbon. I mean, the problem with Portugal is you have a rising number of infections and deaths, and there's a local lockdown imminent, isn't there, in the greater Lisbon area. But you feel that Portugal is being unfairly treated by the UK.
Well, good morning. The truth is, when we look in terms of deaths, Susanna, the truth is Portugal has one of the lowest case fatality rates in the world. We've been having 3 to 6 deaths per day in comparison to the UK with 100, 200 deaths per day. It is not true that we are in lockdown in Lisbon. We have some measures put in place to make sure that we are controlling the pandemic in the region. But when we look at the Algarve, for example, or Porto, which are main destinations for the Brits, we see that we practically have no numbers. And when we compare ourselves to countries that you are considering to green list, like France or Netherlands or even Belgium, it's ridiculous, really, to make any comparison to consider that Portugal.
Well, in that case, if your numbers are so low, why would you risk taking tourists from the UK?
Well, the truth is we have a long-standing relationship. When Britain was in its darkest COVID hour, with your prime minister laying in an ICU bed, fighting for his life, actually with a Portuguese nurse standing by his side for 48 hours, we never at any moment considered blocking the entrance of our British friends, because we've always done so. And people that have to make this decision have to close their eyes and remember their last time in Portugal on a holiday. When they got off the plane, the person that welcomed them here, the receptionist at the hotel, the trouble is,
if you don't mind me just jumping in there, the trouble is,
yeah, sure.
I'm not sure that friendship really matters. What matters is people living or dying. And this is part of the problem, is that you're talking about established pre-pandemic relationships, when actually the reality is this is a global pandemic. We're all in the same boat, and nobody wants these infection rates to go up. And I would imagine that Portugal, if you look at someone like New Zealand, they're not letting people in for many, many more months. And there is an argument that countries should be a lot more insular until they really get on top of it.
You're absolutely right, Piers. What I'm saying is that based on that relationship, one would expect that you use fair arguments, scientifically based arguments, rationale arguments. So I ask you, after you close your eyes thinking about your last time in Portugal, open them and look at the numbers. And let's be real. Let's look at France, let's look at Netherlands, let's look at Belgium, and look at Portugal, and tell me, what is the rationale behind this ridiculous decision? Portugal will always welcome the British people, as and making sure that it is safe for their holidays here and keeping it safe for the Portuguese people. But we will never forget the British government's decision if they decide to lock us out, to put us on a blacklist with no rationale in terms of the scientific numbers. And that is the only way we're going to beat this pandemic.
Well, Henry Smith, you're the MP for West Sussex, which I presume, does it include Gatwick Airport?
It does, yeah, very much so.
OK, so you have a vested interest locally in this. You're also chair of the all-party Future of Aviation group. I mean, a number of people would say, as much as they want a holiday, that actually this is an irrational decision, because it is putting the needs of the economy, the aviation, the tourism industries, above public health. And, that irrationality is seen in the decision to exclude Portugal. I mean, Portugal has fewer cases than a number of other countries which are going to be green-lit.
Well, I think we have, as a country, addressed this on the basis of health. This pandemic has been unprecedented around the globe. Certainly in this country, it is unfortunately no exception to that. And we have put health at the very top of the agenda. But we also need to start getting our economy going again, because otherwise the other health morbidities and impact on our national wealth will be significant, possibly for a decade or so to come. And that's why we do need to start regenerating our industries. Travel and aviation were one of the first, obviously, to be immediately negatively impacted, and will be one of the slowest to recover. So getting our economy going again is very important.
It is. I'll tell you something else that's really important, and that is getting children back into school. And I think for a lot of people, it is remarkable that children will be allowed to get onto a packed plane, which is an enclosed environment, and go off to countries which have, still high infection rates, but they can't get back into a classroom. And we're still months away from children getting an education. Have we got our priorities wrong?
Well, no, I would agree with you. I think children should be going back to school. Obviously, we're almost about to hit what would normally be the summer holidays anyway. And the government has certainly said that children should be back in school in September for the start of the new academic year. I would have liked to have seen children returning to school because of the extremely low risk in that setting, given the age range.
Why has the government not managed to do that?
Well, I think there have been a lot of pressures on the government. There have been, I'm not a member of the government, but...
No, but you're a member of the Conservative Party.
Indeed so. On the one hand, we've got people who are saying that lockdown measures should continue for the foreseeable future. And then we've got another extreme saying that we should be completely opening up. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think that is broadly where we are. Now, hindsight's a wonderful thing. And no doubt when there's an inquiry into the response to COVID-19, the truth of what we should have done will come out. But treading that fine line is extremely difficult. So I would agree. I think schools should be going back.
Is there anything that your Conservative government's done in this pandemic that you would say was good?
Yeah, I think the fact that the NHS was in the early days predicted to be overwhelmed and wasn't, the building of the Nightingale Hospital, I think is a remarkable effort that was achieved.
But the hospital barely got used. Over 300 health and care workers were killed on the front line of this, and you sent 25,000 elderly people back into care homes without testing if they had COVID, which created a huge epidemic in care homes. So all this, we saved the NHS from being run over. Actually, all you did was ship it into care homes.
Well, that is an aspect that I do think we will need to be investigated. I do think people were perhaps released from health care settings into social care settings too soon. But certainly the predictions at the beginning of this pandemic were that the NHS would be overwhelmed. It wasn't. It's been a horrendous experience for this country and many others. And as I say, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we do, I think, now need to get our economy going again. Otherwise, the effects on other health issues, I chair the all-party parliamentary group on blood cancer, for example, the fact that many cancer patients haven't been treated in the way that they should have done because of the focus on COVID-19. If we are going into a recession, I hope if it is a recession, it's a short one. Yeah. But nevertheless, poverty and job losses causes ill health.
They're all very serious.
Well-being.
Yeah, we agree with you about that. Let me just ask Alex: would you fly at the moment?
I do not feel that there are enough health protection measures in place to at least satisfy the frequency that I would normally fly. I would normally be on a plane every 3 days. And yet in the UK, it's that line, it's that nothing has changed. Henry Smith, Conservative MP, you said that you are part of the Future of Aviation Committee. Where are the health protection measures in place? Where is the plans to follow the rest of the world with testing for passenger arrivals? Where are the passenger contact tracing systems? Where are the nationwide health protection measures at airports, like screening, consistency across the country? We're still not looking outside. And I think, again, with the poorly timed quarantine, we are making a second mistake, saying that July and August holidays, pandemic holidays, will suddenly recover the economy and the air travel sector. But what happens to the airlines when they face a long, hard winter where COVID-19 is unable to coexist with air travel because there are no health protection measures in place?
I'll take that as one of the great no's of all time.
Yeah.
Professor Sridhar, would you fly?
Currently, I would not fly, just because, again, exactly what Alex was saying. I don't think the measures are in place. I guess I would say non-essential travel. I mean, if people are going to fly, I would say use masks. And the other thing to say is when you go on holiday, it's not going to be like your holiday from before. It's going to be masks in many of these settings. It's going to be distancing. I would just love to see a focus in the summer in the UK on suppressing the virus, getting the cases really low, and looking ahead 6 to 8 months to the winter, because the NHS coped, but it coped because it became the COVID health service.
Let's
So
just
we cannot have that happen again.
OK, let's just put Alex's points to Henry Smith. Where are all those measures to make us confident about getting on a plane again?
Well, I should correct Alex. It's not a committee. We don't make decisions on the conditions of air travel. We're a group of like-minded MPs across the political spectrum that is really advocating that we get.
Yeah, but the question stands, doesn't it? You know, you want to encourage people to get back on a plane. Where are the measures to encourage them?
But I do agree that testing is a part of that. So, for example, in Gatwick Airport, they have one of the largest public testing areas for COVID-19 in one of their car parks. I believe that should be able to be deployed for incoming passengers.
But that's not part of the aviation strategy, is it? That's just geographically located at Gatwick. Still, in terms of a long-term strategy so that COVID-19 can exist with frequent air travel, with business travel, there are still no measures. Aircraft are still cleaned once every 24 hours, just like when there was no pandemic. If we are hearing everything about surfaces and everything we can touch, why has there not been a ramp up on cleaning and sanitization on aircraft? Why is the mandatory mask policy not being enforced on all airlines? There are still loopholes. I think without these measures, the UK's aviation strategy is still hoping this will just go away. And Professor Devi, who is arguably the voice of reason throughout this pandemic, states that COVID-19 isn't going anywhere and we have to learn to eliminate that. And I think with aviation, to abandon it now is making the same mistake as abandoning it in the beginning, where 20 million people flew in with no checks, no measures and no tests.
Well said, Alex. I want to fly. I want to go somewhere, but you've got to think about this very carefully, because some of the scenes I'm seeing on airplanes, they don't make me feel comfortable. I just want to say to Ricardo, Portugal's a great country. So I'm very sorry about the situation. Been there many times, fabulous golf courses, beaches, lovely people. Would love to be reunited with you guys, and I hope we can get it sorted, because the Portuguese are special people. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to our experts. And let's hope we get back to some semblance of normality before too long.
Thank you all very much indeed. The Prime Minister has been out and about, out of the fridge this morning, and he's appeared on Times Radio.
New radio network. Wish them all the very best. A very good lineup of people over there.
We talked to John Pienaar about it, didn't we, last week? Now,